Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I am your host, Marina, and today I have an awesome guest for you as always. Her name is Yundt Coles. She's an AFMC certified functional and integrative medicine health coach and certified acupressure practitioner. She loves inspiring and guiding her clients to optimal health and wellness through promoting positive food and lifestyle changes, and she was on her own healing journey for over a decade, first finding out she was gluten intolerant, struggling with debilitating abdominal pain and fibromyalgia, as well as overcoming SIBO, Candida, and chronic stress. Through her research, her work with clients, and her personal story, she's especially adept at helping creatives and type A's support digestive health and the mood imbalances that often go along with them. So without further ado, Jen, what an impressive bio. I want to start off by welcoming you to the show and asking you just about your background, where you grew up, and how you came to do this kind of work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Marina. This is such a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So a little bit about me. I am also a military kid. I know you've had a few on your show in the past and moved around a lot. So change is definitely in my DNA. I like to try new things, move things around, redecorate, move. I've probably moved about 33 or 34 times in my life. So it keeps things fresh, right? Um, and and part of that growing up, I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but I was a preemie, I was not breastfed. I was kind of brought into the world with likely an impaired digestive tract and microbiome, right? So it all kind of started at an early age, and I spent my childhood with stomach aches, my teen years living on ibuprofen and Pepto-Bismol and all the things like that. So didn't get a really great start. And then it wasn't until, I had a roommate in Chicago at one point who found out she was celiac. And so that kind of opened my eyes to like, maybe I should look into this, right? And found out I actually have an allergy or an antibody reaction to a separate protein in wheat, which is not gluten, but it's another one. So it's very interesting. So I kind of started changing my diet, and my eyes were kind of opening to alternatives and things like that. And around that same time, I was actually in a car accident with my now husband. And that led me down the whole rabbit hole of finding alternatives for pain management. And so that's how I discovered Chinese medicine. And I did a lot of that study and then went into acupressure as well before my kids were born. And so I've worn many hats in my day. And even as an art conservator in my early career, I studied art history and was repairing artwork for museums and galleries, and was exposed to many, many chemicals at that point in my life and just really didn't know better. And so, all those things start to take their toll, they kind of add up in the body, and slowly increasing the toxic load that I was carrying. And eventually, many of those things caught up with me. There's so many more things I could talk about in between, but I think the big exclamation on everything was several years ago, my body just decided, you know what, you're kind of done. And I ended up with broken heart syndrome, which is a condition you can suffer from extreme stress or loss or trauma. And that actually led me down the whole path of learning more about functional medicine. That was my first introduction to functional medicine, and learned about SIBO that way because my doctor was like, "Hey, have you ever, have you ever heard of SIBO? Let's test you for that." Because what happened was my entire life I was constipated, and then all of a sudden I had broken heart syndrome, and then I had crazy diarrhea for years and years. And, it was really hard for them to figure out how to help me. And so, I did herbals and felt better for about 2 weeks. And then it came back, but a different form came back, which was hydrogen sulfide. And that is actually my specialty now because I was so driven and passionate about finding answers because my doctors were throwing their hands up in the air and giving me antidepressants and just saying, sorry, we don't know how to help you. And so that kind of just led me to my research and my determination to crack that code. And eventually I did. And I've had a practice for several years now, and word got out that I was helping people with SIBO. So that's how I ended up as the SIBO coach. I rebranded several years ago after I finished functional medicine school, and here I am in a nutshell.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that history with us. I think it's so interesting that no matter what industry we may be in, we may get these kind of calls, right? Either a wake up call or a gentle knock, and it gets stronger and stronger, usually, if we don't pay attention, about either our own health or something going on in our life or environment or something within that industry that's toxic itself, like the solvents that you mentioned in the art industry, which I think is fascinating. I always wish I became an artist, but I know that I too would have probably stumbled upon some things I didn't like. Like as a pharmacist, I stumbled upon things in the industry that I didn't like and I wanted to change. So I think, it's like this calling either for yourself or even for the greater collective. Once you hopefully persevere through your own challenges and then you want to kind of give back that torch and light the way for others. So I think that's beautiful. And also what I thought was interesting is that a lot of people, even people who have gone to a lot of doctors and have these medical histories that are complex and these diagnoses, some of them don't know their birth stories as far as whether they were born prematurely or whether they were breastfed. And all of these nuances, right, that you said shape the health of our microbiome and our immunity and our inflammatory responses and our nervous system, even, right, like from early on. And that's not something that most people realize and connect the dots on unless you are in this more holistic and integrative space where we always ask those kind of questions. And it's not to make anybody feel ashamed for the way that they were brought up, because obviously they can't go back and control anything, but it's just to become aware of where those factors originated so that we understand what can be going on there. So I'm curious, because we're talking about SIBO, you're the SIBO coach. I also have, by the way, struggled a lot with digestive chronic gut issues my entire life as well. I got the diagnoses of IBS and SIBO and all kinds of stuff, H. pylori and GERD. So I totally understand that, these are diagnoses that people may get all the time, and they may sound scary, and they may get medications thrown at them, including antibiotics, or in my case, proton pump inhibitors for a while. And then some other people also get the antidepressants or other kinds of medications. And so I'm curious what led you to discovering, your own healing with SIBO.
Yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride, I'll tell you the truth. I mean, I'm kind of one of those like overachiever type A perfectionists, right? And I was just so determined to, you know, well, first I was kind of, just taken back that nobody understood what was going on with me. They would give me that generic type of diagnoses of IBS, which is just a catch-all of pretty much they don't know what's going on, right? And things like that. So it was very, very frustrating, but because of my personality, I think I was just so determined to leave no stone unturned. And I even set aside Fridays every week. Like I don't see clients on Fridays because that's my research day. That's something I love to do. And I'm constantly looking for new things, experimenting. Those clients of mine who are open to trying new things as well, we'll do things together like that. But really, I've learned so much by just experimenting on myself over the years. And I think the thing that has been the most eye-opening and the most transformative for me personally, and I see this in my practice as well, is learning how to re-regulate the nervous system, because for me, that was huge. the going, going, going. The universe was always putting these things in my way, like, here's a car accident for you. Here's a fall. You can crack your head open. All these things that have happened in my life were always messages. And I just didn't really understand that. Like, hey, Jen, you need to slow down. And that's really a message that I try to not only remember for myself every single day because I get so, I don't know if you want to call it anxious or excited, but I just want to keep going and want to keep doing. And so it's something that I have to remind myself of every day, but also it's something that I try to teach my clients. It's really where the transformation happens. If you're dealing with a chronic issue, it's likely that your nervous system is dysregulated and you're stuck in fight and flight. And when you're in that place, you don't heal because your body doesn't feel safe to heal. And so that's kind of the crux. Over the years, my practice has changed to include more of that message for my clients and my audience, like on social media and things like that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating start to my next question. So, so I see it more and more, like you said, on things like social media and in different programs in different contexts, and we can call it by different names as well. But the most scientifically accurate might be what you said about nervous system regulation, right? And there is so much science backing that, and yet it's sort of on the back burner in conventional approaches, right? And so it's really on the outskirts, but it's so important. And
Right.
the thing about the nervous system is that it interacts with us and the external environment, right? It's really this connection between us responding to external environment and then also interpreting that back internally. And it happens instantaneously. So it really doesn't take um, much time for us to feel the effects once we start paying attention to it and once we start implementing techniques to help ourselves rewire and regulate. You can see those effects so quickly that I wish this is something that we would talk more about, even in conventional therapies and approaches.
Mhm.
And it would really be amazing if we could, as parents, model it to our kids and have our kids already know how to regulate. So that's kind of like my dream. And
Yeah, same.
one of my coaches actually has a technique that reminded me of your technique about sort of slowing down and looking at the big picture and keeping your purpose in mind as you live your life. And it's really about even sometimes imagining like what if this were your last day of life on earth, and not necessarily that you would drop everything you're doing and do something different, but the way you do each thing that you had planned today might have a different effect on you if you had that attitude, that mindset.
Yeah, yeah, I really love
And it
that.
really just invites that presence, right? And so for a person like yourself and many others that were conditioned societally to just go, go, go and move, and just be productive, right? By the patriarchy and the capitalism society that we are part of, it's hard for us to slow down and to prioritize rest and to get enough sleep and to do all the holistic lifestyle things that we talk about as practitioners, right? So it
Yeah,
really does take that rewiring to give ourselves permission to go on a different speed, right? Like to to turn that
definitely.
dial
Turn the dial down.
down.
Yes, yes. And to your point, you know what? I think what you said is so powerful because um, I don't know. Are you a mother?
Yeah,
Do you-
mother of two.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, same. So I have two college students now, which is totally tripping me out. But the thing that I love is my youngest is 17, turning 18 soon, and she's away, far away in the mountains in the redwoods, and it's her that environment is her love language. Being in the redwoods and near the ocean, and it's just like all those awesome negative ions that she's absorbing. And having her just text me, hey, I'm giving a shout out to my mom who taught me that I need to take a break and eat the rainbow on my plate today. And I went out and sat on my favorite mossy log and did some journaling. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, had I been had I known all this stuff at 17, I would be a totally different person. And it's just the power of once we kind of implement and incorporate these things in our own lives, being that example to other people. And I know you had a friend and colleague of mine on your show recently, Kathleen Klug, who has an amazing book. I'm just going to plug it here for her. It's called Start with One. And I just feel like that message in general is so important, especially as practitioners here and what we're trying to teach our audiences and our clients, patients, how to make change, because sometimes it can feel so overwhelming. We can kind of know all these things like, oh, yeah, I probably need to do some deep breathing. Oh, yeah, I probably need to do my yoga stretches. Oh, yeah, maybe I should go get some sunshine. But like, do we really know how to do any of that? Do we feel committed enough to do it to make the change? And so it's really important as practitioners, as coaches, to show folks how to do those things on a regular basis so that they can get the benefit. Because it is easy, it takes practice, but it's possible. And those are the things, those are the tiny things that add up to make the biggest difference. And to your point, too, I was going to say, and all the doctor's appointments that I've been to for my digestive issues in the past, I never once had a doctor say to me, well, what's your sleep pattern right now? Or how's it going in your job right now? Or what about your marriage? How's it going? Or things like, how much water are you drinking every day? Little questions like that can make all the difference for someone. And a bigger question would even be in the case of SIBO. I've never heard a doctor ask me, well, why do you think it is that your immune system is tolerating this ongoing simmering infection in your gut? There's never any questions about what's your stress level and what's your immune system doing. And those are really important factors for overcoming any kind of chronic issue. But, in this case, in my case, talking about SIBO. So to your point, I'm swinging all the way around back to the beginning of the circle is yes, it's really important for us to not only live these things, but to teach these things.
Yeah, and the best way to teach it is by living it. So that's another full circle. And shout out to Kathleen here for her book. And I loved having her on the show. And her quote was amazing, which is, "It's so hard to change, but it's more difficult to stay the same." So
Yes.
I really am taking that quote and sharing with people. And then just to plug another little quote from another mentor of mine, the change can be simple, but not easy, right? So again,
Yes,
we can know it
exactly.
intellectually, like you said, oh yeah, go outside, take a walk, drink more water, like all the things that you mentioned, de-stress. But like, how do you actually sit down and prioritize those things and put them into your calendar and live by them and actually
Yes,
prioritize those things like bedtime routine, a good sleep schedule and like starting your day off like with your cup full, right? And you mentioned another metaphor where health is really like a bucket, right? So you can overfill the bucket where like more and more disease processes can start to compile on all these toxins. And then it's our job to kind of like keep it nice and clean and do the detox and all the lifestyle and other shifts that we can implement to keep our cup clean. And of course, you can do it the other way around if you want to fill your cup or empty your cup, whatever you prefer. But there's this like capacity, right, that we
yeah,
can hold for so long until something breaks.
exactly. Yeah, I use that analogy sometimes in my practice for things like toxins or histamine overload. We have like a bucket and we can only tolerate so much. It starts overflowing and we start seeing symptoms, right? And it's really our duty and our responsibility to check in with those buckets sometimes because they do need to be either refilled, depending on what we're talking about, or emptied and cleansed. And, it's unfortunate that we live in a time that we have to do those things regularly, but it's imperative to avoid ongoing stress, physiological stressors, toxins, and all the things like you mentioned before. Yeah, so good point.
Yeah, and I want to rewind at the diagnoses that we were kind of throwing around. So IBS stands for irritable bowel syndrome. And like you said, it's a catch-all thing that if you go to a gastroenterologist and all your labs are pretty much normal in your test, but you still have, either constipation or diarrhea or cramps or like some weird symptoms that they can't really pinpoint, they'll just say, oh, you have irritable bowel syndrome, and you could have type C or D or mixed. And in my case, what I thought was really strange that she didn't even ask me, like, what am I eating or what am I eating habits? Like, how am I eating? Or what
Mhm.
is, maybe it is related to stress because that's known scientifically too, that it's most prevalent in women and it's most connected to the nervous system and stress. So it's like, why weren't those questions being asked when this diagnosis was thrown around when I think I was in high school when I was
Mhm.
given this diagnosis, right? And so there was absolutely nothing about food journaling or logging or,
No
recognizing about slowing
information.
down or chewing or whether this happens around test time, and I'm just a little bit disappointed looking back. In fact, I'm a lot disappointed. And the second diagnosis that we mentioned is SIBO, right, which is small intestinal bowel overgrowth. So if you can talk to
Bacterial
us,
overgrowth.
yeah, if you can talk to us about, kind of what are the differences, what are the similarities, how can people know or tell what symptoms do people have and when should they seek to take care of it and what kind of practitioner should they go to?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Marina. So IBS is, yeah, like I said, kind of a catch-all diagnosis. It's basically when you're just, maybe you're having some gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, or back and forth, basically an irritable bowel, right? And so studies have shown recently, and it kind of fluctuates depending on what study you're looking at, but it's a good 60 to 80% of people who get that diagnosis with SIBO, I'm sorry, with IBS have SIBO behind that whole picture. And so some common things to look for that I see in my practice are things like bloating typically an hour or two after you've eaten. So it's in that area right underneath the navel in the lower chakra there, feeling bloated, nauseous, heartburn, GERD, things like that. It can be diarrhea or constipation, or even alternating between the two. I will see a lot of people who are constipated because they have methanogen overgrowth, but what happens is they're taking a ton of magnesium or something like that to help them go to the bathroom, Miralax and things. So then they end up with diarrhea. So they're really not sure what's going on, right? There are some really unique other things that aren't really digestive related that might surprise some people. So brain fog, a cognitive impairment, racing heart, rashes, vulvodynia in women, so pain around the vulva area, anxiety, depression, poor sleep, all kinds of things, right? Not being able to exercise like you once did because you feel so fatigued, all sorts of things that don't even seem related to your digestive tract. I mean, and on occasion, I'll have folks come to my practice who are having chronic migraines or arthritis in their feet and they don't know why, and it's rooted in their gut. And we find out that it's SIBO related. Um, so all sorts of things, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, the list goes on and on. And some of those things can be what I would call vague symptoms. Like if you go to your doctor and you're just complaining about those things and everything turns up normal on your test, so they say you're fine. I always recommend if you're fitting any of these, checking off any of these things, I would suggest, dive a little deeper, ask more questions, find someone who's willing to explore whatever might be going on in your gut, whether that's a stool test or a breath test. And so that's usually how we get started. Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about the testing process. And you mentioned before the hydrogen sulfide and then the different types of SIBO. So how do you distinguish and what do you test first?
Yeah, yeah. So they all have some general common symptoms, in common, I mean, and but hydrogen sulfide is a little different, right? So Um, okay, so let me back up. So a breath test, typically the gold standard is a 3-hour lactulose breath test. And this is something that you can get from your doctor or even, from a practitioner who can order you a test like myself. And then what you can do is you're breathing into these little pouches when you have provoked a reaction with a sugar. And in this case, it's lactulose. And so what that does is the fermentation begins in the gut, and then you're releasing that gas from the bacteria. It's going through and being aspirated through the lungs, and then it's being captured on the test. And that's kind of the clue. The other way to figure out if you have SIBO is to do a little more invasive testing, which is taking an actual sample of your digestive juices, like in the intestinal tract. I mean, intestinal juices, right, in the tract itself, and kind of seeing what type of bacteria is growing there. Another way you can kind of get a clue, although this is not technically a way to diagnose SIBO, is to do a comprehensive stool test, because any bacteria that's flagged there, that could be a clue for what's going on in the small intestine. Again, it's one data point in a person that you're looking at. So it's not, no test is 100%. But this is the way we kind of go about it. Now, speaking of hydrogen sulfide, which is my specialty within the realm of SIBO, this one's a little more unique because that hydrogen sulfide gas is highly toxic. Like if you get exposed to hydrogen sulfide in the environment somewhere, say you're out and about and you get exposed, you have to immediately go into a hyperbaric chamber to like infuse your body with more oxygen because it's quite toxic. Um, the thing that's interesting is because it becomes more systemic rather than, a hydrogen or a methane type SIBO or EMO, um, it can cause body pain, fibromyalgia, heart racing, temperature dysregulation, things going on with your brain, all kinds of things that aren't seemingly related to your digestive tract, and can be quite toxic for people. So it's really important to address. One common sign of that too is having what I'm like going to call a rotten egg gas or smells like sulfur. So it can be coming out either end. Typically, it causes diarrhea if located more in the small intestine, and constipation if located more in the large intestine. And it kind of acts as I don't know, it's kind of like a switch. It kind of turns off your migrating motor complex and slows everything down. So people can get really constipated or have crazy chronic diarrhea and gas, and it's quite painful. By the end of the day, they feel like they're 6, 7, 9 months pregnant because their stomach is so huge. And so if anyone's feeling like any of that's familiar, I would highly recommend that you go get yourself tested. Interestingly, there's only one test currently out right now. It's called Trio Smart that tests for all three gases. You do have to have a prescription to be able to order that from a doctor. So in my practice, because I'm not a doctor, I'm a functional medicine health coach, I'm using the 3-hour lactulose breath test in my practice. And the way that I use this specifically for hydrogen sulfide, I'm totally geeking out here, Marina. So I hope you're still with me. Um, the breath on the test, the parts per million will be a flat line, and that's indicative of hydrogen sulfide. So what happens is sometimes folks will go get this test and their doctors see the flat line, so they think it's negative for SIBO and they get a misdiagnosis. So it's really important, and it does get missed. Unfortunately, conventional doctors, even GIs, aren't trained to read this or to understand how to read between the lines when they're looking at someone in front of them. Yeah. Did that answer?
Yeah,
Sometimes I start
fascinating,
going on a
fascinating.
tangent.
I have more and more questions. This is great. So first, let me rewind just a tiny bit and say that we know the microbiome is important and we want a diverse microbiome in the areas where they are commensal and beneficial and symbiotic. And then we don't want them in other areas. So the small
Right.
intestine is not where we want the bacteria because it causes all of these gases and goes into the blood and causes these systemic symptoms that you're mentioning. We want them to be just limited to the large intestine where they help us with a bunch of stuff, including anti-inflammatory short chain fatty acids and helping our immunity
Yes.
and helping us activate vitamins and recirculate certain things. So we want that, and that's why the stool set test, like you said, can be a useful tool as well to just see what's going on there. But we really don't want them in the small intestine. And I personally
Right.
did the lactulose test, I believe, and I had to fast for at least 12, if not 24 hours before
Mhm.
that. And
Yep.
honestly, I thought that the fasting itself was really therapeutic. And I started feeling better after that test right away. So I
Yeah.
attributed to the fasting. Now I'm curious about your experience and if you can walk us through like your typical process if a patient comes in, thinks they might have SIBO, thinks you might be able to help them, what's kind of like the basic process and the step by step you take them through?
Yeah, yeah. So first I want to just say to your point about the fasting, this is super interesting because a lot of us have become grazers, right? We're constantly eating little things. And that was kind of the new black for a while, like have a meal every 3 hours and things like that. For people who are prone to things like SIBO, for whatever reason, there's a million reasons why you could have SIBO. Um, Grazing all day is not the way to go because you need to have that migrating motor complex to cleanse out. And so lots of times people do feel a relief from fasting. And I just wanted to bring that up really quick. Okay, so when someone comes to me, most of the time, folks who are coming to me at this point have already been down the Dr. Google rabbit hole, have been researching, are part of 50 different support groups on Facebook, and they've been to their doctor. Even they've been on rifaximin a few times, which is the gold standard antibiotic for SIBO. But they keep relapsing. So those are the folks that typically come to see me. So they're quite educated and they know quite a bit, and they're just ready to be done with it, right? But they're always really surprised when we sit down together, like on a strategy call, for instance, and we say, okay, well, what's been going on with your health history here? Give me in a nutshell what's been going on. What are your key symptoms here? Obviously, many of them have things in common, but everyone's highly unique. So we're really trying to zone in or hone in rather and focus on what's going on that unique individual. I don't use blanket protocols in my practice because I don't find that it's helpful. Not everybody fits in the same box, and I certainly wasn't that way. So I don't assume that everyone else is going to, right? So we talk about what's been going on, but then we talk about, okay, well, at the top of the what I'm going to call quote unquote protocol, as a health coach, I don't technically use protocols, but the plan, I guess I could call it, is we start talking about, okay, let's try to start implementing right away some things that are going to help slow down your body so that you can get in a good place where you're feeling safe to heal. We talk about stress management techniques and things like that. Also, at the very beginning, before we even talk about SIBO, is we talk about the immune system. So we talk about how can we support this person in their unique environment and support their immune function so that they have a robust response, robust but appropriate. We don't want it over responding and causing other issues, right? A robust, appropriate response to prepare the body for when we start going to next steps. That next step is often addressing advanced biofilm layers in the intestinal tract. This is where conventional medicine is missing the mark. So I always like to use this analogy. You may have heard it on my social media at some point, but I like to compare your digestive lining, okay, so bear with me here, to the old couch on the frat house porch, okay? So, it's been partied on. It's got some wear and tear, some rips and, folds here and there. It's got like crumbled chips and things on top and some party cups. All right. So, if you were to go to your conventional medicine doctor and they say, okay, yeah, all agree to test you for SIBO. It comes back positive. They give you a prescription for rifaximin, for example. It's a 2-week round of this antibiotic, and that's essentially like sweeping off the top of the couch. All right. So you got whatever was there available to access, and then you're like, okay, yeah, it looks clean. And you might have um, a decrease in symptoms. You may feel better for several weeks or even a few months after that, right? But because you didn't pick up the cushions and fluff them and get in the cracks and sweep underneath, some of those things will likely grow back. In addition, that biofilm layer or that couch is it's a really great place for things like parasites, Candida mold, viruses, all sorts of other things besides bacteria to take up, space. And they like to hang out there and they don't want to go anywhere else, right? So it's really important for us to address that biofilm before we even think about what kind of herbals or antibiotics or etc. that we're going to put on top to go after that overgrowth. In my opinion, I'm not in the business of like crazy kill protocols. I don't like my clients to be on constant antibiotics or herbals and things like that. I do find that there is a place for rebuilding and repopulating and supporting a healthy gut lining, healing those tight junctions so that you're not setting yourself up for things like autoimmunity and things like that down the road, right? So that's a big part of our conversation before we even talk about the SIBO. Then we go and we decide, does the person want to do the elemental diet, for instance? That's a 3-week, 21 days of a liquid protocol. Do we want to try herbals? Do you want to get a prescription from your doctor for rifaximin? And in that case, I often combine it with different herbals to make it more effective. And so, like I said, it's never a cookie cutter application to whoever I'm talking to. It's always going to be different depending on what's going on with them and their unique health and their picture and their environment. I do see a lot of mold toxicity in my practice. And Candida, and that goes hand in hand with SIBO very often. And then, like I said, we're talking about prokinetics, how to keep that migrating motor complex working, because oftentimes that's a root cause for why people's SIBO comes back. They took the round of rifaximin and they went on their way right after. They didn't get any prep before or post support after all of that. And then even after that, I'm talking about let's explore what's going on with your cellular activity and your cellular integrity, because lots of times that cellular membrane gets damaged from all that inflammation. We're talking about, is your mitochondria working properly? How can we support your liver? What's going on with your gallbladder, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking at all of the things, not just your small intestine. It's a
Wow.
lot. It's
Yes.
a lot.
Yeah, it
It's a
does sound.
comprehensive, but that's the thing that has to be done. We are such unique human beings, and all of our systems are connected. It's not just one thing. And so, unfortunately, when you go to the doctor, they see you as one body part while you're there, and then they send you down the hall for the other body part, and they're not talking to each other. And that's not how it's meant to be. We are holistic beings, right? Everything's connected, and it really does take a comprehensive, methodical approach to overcoming something chronic like SIBO.
Right. Yeah, you're speaking to the complexity and the conversation, right, that's happening within the body parts. And we have to kind of assess and address all of those. And I want to relate it back actually to the biofilm and the bacteria, right? Because the bacteria is actually superior to us. We can learn a thing or two about how
Right.
they live in a community and they devise all kind of systems and ways to help each other develop resistance. And they spread those messages like wildfire to each other. And that's why right now we are concerned about antibacterial resistance and antibacterial stewardship, right? To really be careful when we even use antibiotics, because we're seeing that the bacteria are super smart, and the amount of years that we've been using antibiotics they've been multiplying generations and
Mhm.
exponentially transferring all of those resistance mechanisms across their species and across different species, not just their own. And so when
Yes.
they create these biofilms, they stick and adhere to the surfaces of that inner lining, and it's really tough to get rid of them. So just like our teeth have those plaques, they can also form in other areas of the body. So that is
Yes.
such a good point that you were mentioning, really
Yeah.
addressing that.
Yeah, so true. And like you said, I love what you said because they are constantly adapting and they are really in charge because we used to think the brain told the gut what to do, but really we know now that it's more the gut telling the brain what to do, right? And we have more bacteria DNA in our body than actual human DNA, I guess they say. And so I find it so interesting. But the diversity and the happy coexistence of all of those things, fungi, bacteria, parasites, all the things, we get kind of the EBGBs when we talk about parasites, but they're quite common. And if they're living and coexisting peacefully, then it's not an issue, right? Also, I wanted to point out something that you said that was really interesting. That's kind of a side tangent, but two things here. Oral microbiome, huge. I see this a ton in my practice. People don't understand that this is the top of your digestive tract, right? And this, if you've got bacteria or even chronic sinusitis, things like that, can definitely be part of your SIBO picture. So it's important to address your oral and nasal microbiome as well. And the other thing I was going to say is you mentioned H. pylori early on in our conversation. And what I find really fascinating at this point is some doctors, the protocol, the the conventional standard is to do like a triple antibiotic attack against H. pylori. And H. pylori, as we know, is bacteria in the stomach lining, and that can affect your stomach acid and how you're absorbing your nutrients, or at least starting to break them down. And it can cause heartburn and all sorts of things. Um, the thing that's interesting is I read a study recently where babies were being born now without having any commensal H. pylori bacteria. It's because we're totally eradicating it, which we don't want to do, right? All of these things need to coexist in our body in a healthy number. But to your point of overuse of antibiotics, we're seeing that now, babies being born without it. Yeah.
Yeah, like the body's not meant to be sterile, and even the places we thought need to be sterile are also now we're finding out, you know what, the blood-brain barrier is not as intact as we thought, and so it's easier to
Yeah.
get in there. But still, yeah, I think to your point of coexisting, like there needs to be an optimal level, right? And when things overgrow, they become opportunistic, they take advantage. That's when things can get very symptomatic and very problematic. And I'll also bring in another example that I heard actually at a dental health conference, a holistic one by Biocidin, that
Uh-huh.
opportunistic bacteria are kind of like your mother-in-law, right? Like it's nice when she comes in sometimes and like helps out, but if she like starts moving her things in and like critiquing everything and like trying to take over your
Yeah.
space, like you don't want that.
Gotta go. Yeah. That's a really great analogy. I like that.
Yeah, I thought you might. So, Jen, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I so appreciate your expertise. And a lot of my listeners are other pharmacists or other people that are trained in conventional medicine that are trying to go towards a more integrative and holistic perspective. So, based on your journey, first of all, how did you just like kind of put the dice in and decide to take this specific functional medicine program and have the I guess motivation, inspiration, and really um I'm looking for this word courage, right?
Yeah.
Courage to just step out onto this path. And how did you gain this level of expertise? And what would your advice be for other people wanting to do something like this?
Yeah. Well, that's such a big question, Marina. Well, I'd say I started out, I did IIN. I think you did too, right? Yeah. So I
Yes.
did IIN at first because, well, this is one of those moments where I was just laying in bed and I was so sick. And I just said, is this it for me? I have young children. I can't even go to their soccer games because I can't leave the house. I'm afraid I'm going to poop my pants, right? I mean, just really hit rock bottom at that point. laying in bed and I saw an ad on my Facebook feed for IIN and I was like, you know what? That's totally what I want to do. And mostly I was thinking about doing it for myself. Like, if I go to health coaching school, maybe I'll be able to help myself. But once I got into that, of course I loved it. But I also felt like once I had my practice, I wanted way more science and research because that's how my brain works. I wanted the meat, right? I wanted more information. I didn't want to just tell people, oh, you need to eat more broccoli because I didn't feel like that was super helpful, right? And so, and then I went down my whole broken heart and SIBO diagnosis journey. And I had a colleague from IIN who actually was going to the School of Applied Functional Medicine at the time. And when I was hearing her talk about things, I thought, oh my gosh, this is where I need to be. So I enrolled in that program and was doing that in between seeing my current clients at that time. And I think somewhere along the line, word got out, and I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Alison Seebecker. She's kind of one of the go-to SIBO practitioners in the world. She invited me to be on a forum with international SIBO treating doctors and naturopaths, and I was the only health coach there, which was that was kind of flattering to me. These are all the people that I've been studying under, and so we were doing our own tests and experiments with vetting out testing and talking about hydrogen sulfide specifically, at the same time that I was still trying to overcome that myself and develop plans to help myself and my clients. I think the main thing would just be don't lose your vision. Many things come and go in life, but once we have like that drive or that passion to focus, we can let the things that don't matter fall away and just focus. I think that was the big thing for me. I had that drive to figure it out, a little bit of desperation, to tell you the truth. Sometimes, we stumble on these like discoveries, I'll call them, um, out of desperation and because of our personal stories, because we're just so convinced that we have to find the answer. I think the other thing too is asking for help, because sometimes when we feel like we're, in the case of like a pharmacist at this point, you're trained specifically in that area, but being open, being honest, being coachable, and asking for help from a colleague that's a step ahead of you, I think is also a key and how we can learn and keep going forward. I'd also say too, surrounding yourself with like the most awesome people help bring you up as well. And I think that's been one key to my own success is surrounding myself with like brilliant people. And I just learn so much from them. And I'm so grateful for their, I don't know if you want to call it companionship relationships. Um, I think that's mostly how I think I would tell someone to just keep going.
Wow, well, that was a perfect answer to a complicated question. So thank you so much once again. And if you have just one more minute, I'd love to do a rapid fire round with you.
Okay.
Okay, so the first question I always ask my guests is, what's the number one thing that people can do right now to increase their quality of life?
Oh gosh, there's so many, right? What comes to my mind is, so my mom is from the South and she has a very thick accent, but growing up, she would always tell me, Jenny, you need to give yourself a break. And I always just thought that was so lame because, I had things to do. But now that I'm like 50, I'm like, dang, give yourself a break. It's okay. Don't shame yourself. Rest when you need to. Take care of yourself first. I saw this really great quote from one of my colleagues who likes to say, you know how we always say, fill your pitcher first and then help other people?
Yep.
Well, hers is a teacup on top of a saucer. And so she says, fill your teacup and let it run over into the saucer and then help other people from that saucer. And I just thought, like, wow, that's so wise, you know? Um, but yeah, giving yourself a break. You
Wow.
deserve it. You deserve it. Yeah.
I just have to comment right here that I was shocked when you said two kids, let alone two grown kids. And then you don't look anywhere near your age. You
Oh,
look super
thanks.
young. So question number two, what is your favorite hobby or something people may not know about you?
Well, my favorite hobby right now is playing guitar. I've played guitar for about 30 years, but I recently got back into it in the last maybe 7 or 8. Um, a lot of people know that, so I don't know if that's surprising. But I did just sign up for voice lessons a couple of months ago, so that's my new thing. And writing poetry and writing songs, it's just how I stay sane. Yeah.
Love that. And the last rapid fire question, what's your favorite meal to either cook or eat?
Ooh. Well, as a health coach, I probably shouldn't say this, but I think my favorite thing to eat is super nachos, like with all the stuff. But I wouldn't recommend that on a regular basis. I would say one thing I do enjoy preparing for myself or my family is my really good chicken soup. It has all kinds of vegetables in it. It's so savory and good. And at this time of year, I love making it. Oh, another thing I was going to say was some people might not know this about me, but once upon a time, I owned a gluten-free bakery. And so did that for several years because baking is my love language. I love to bake for people. And one of my favorite things to make was coffee cake. Some of my friends would call it crack cake because it was so addictive. But mostly, all the colors. I try to sit down and have a meal that has all the colors. That's the thing that I like to do. Yeah.
That's a great answer for a health coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
And give me soup all year round, as well as the gluten-free baked goods too.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
Love it.
Everyone's
Well,
going to be like, "Hey, I heard this health coach say we can eat super nachos." No,
right,
that's
right,
not.
right.
It's just my guilty
That's not the
pleasure.
take-home message here. Well, Jen, you've been such a wonderful world of wisdom. So thank you again for coming on and sharing all that with us. Please tell the audience how they can get in touch with you, connect, learn more, and ask you more questions.
Yeah, so the easiest way, Marina, is to find me on my website. So it's www.thesibocoach.com. And there you can find all my information about my programs, my free guides. I have a bazillion free guides on there. You can order labs and supplements and all sorts of things. So that's really the one-stop shop how to find me. You can even book a call from the website. And right now I have a free guide on there. It's called Calm Your Mind, Calm Your Gut. And so I encourage your listeners to take advantage of that. And basically, I just want to say this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you having me here. And I just gleaned a lot from your knowledge and from your little section of the medical world as well. And so thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. And that guide sounds amazing and right on point and everything that we discussed today. So thanks for putting that together for the audience. And I look forward to keeping in touch in the future. All right, take
Yes.
care.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.